The pen felt heavier than it should have in my weathered hands as I stared at the papers spread across my kitchen table. 3 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting here, questioning whether to trust my own grandson, I would have laughed them out of my house. But there I was at 78 years old, feeling more alone than I had since Martha passed 5 years earlier. "Come on, Grandpa Joe," Tyler said, his voice carrying that familiar impatience I'd been hearing more often lately. "It's just a simple power of attorney. Mom thinks it would be easier if I could help with your finances. You know, pay bills, handle the banking stuff. You're getting older and we just want to make sure everything's taken care of." I looked up at my grandson, 25 years old, wearing an expensive suit I was pretty sure I'd never seen before, checking his phone every few minutes like he had somewhere more important to be. When had he changed so much? This wasn't the little boy who used to spend summers with Martha and me, the one who'd sit on this very porch for hours, listening to my stories about working at the steel mill, about how I'd saved every penny to buy this house where we'd raised his father. "Tyler, son, I appreciate the concern, but I'm managing just fine," I said, setting the pen down. "My mind's still sharp, my hands still work. I've been paying my own bills for 60 years. He sighed, that exaggerated sigh young people do when they think you're being difficult. "Grandpa, you're 78. Dad told me you forgot to pay the electric bill last month." That stung because it was true. I had forgotten just once because I'd been dealing with the anniversary of Martha's death and my mind had been elsewhere. But I'd caught it, paid it with the late fee, and it hadn't happened since. One time, Tyler, one time in 60 years of perfect credit. "Look," he said, pulling his chair closer to mine, and for a moment I saw a flash of the boy he used to be. "I'm not trying to take over your life or anything, I just want to help. You've got all this money sitting in accounts, not doing anything. I could invest it better, make it grow, maybe help you enjoy your retirement more." There it was, the money. I'd worked 43 years at Pittsburgh Steel, lived frugally, saved everything I could. Martha and I never took fancy vacations, never bought new cars until the old ones died, never ate out unless it was a special occasion. We'd accumulated a modest fortune by most standards, enough to live comfortably and leave something substantial for our family. "The money's doing exactly what it needs to do," I said firmly. "It's keeping me independent, keeping this house running, and ensuring I don't become a burden to anyone." Tyler's face hardened slightly. "Grandpa, let's be honest here. You're not using that money anyway. You live like you're still making $30,000 a year. You've got over $400,000 sitting in savings accounts, earning practically nothing. I could double that in a few years with the right investments." Something cold settled in my stomach. How did he know exactly how much I had? I'd never discussed specific numbers with anyone, not even my son David, Tyler's father. "How do you know what I have in my accounts?" He had the decency to look embarrassed for a moment. "Dad mentioned it. He's worried about you, about whether you're making smart decisions with your money." David. My own son had been discussing my private finances with his son. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. After Martha died, David had been supportive, visiting more often, calling to check on me, but lately those visits felt different. Now I wondered if he'd been taking inventory. "Tyler, I think you should go," I said, standing up from the table. My knees protested. Arthritis had been getting worse, but I needed him to see I wasn't the helpless old man he apparently thought I was. "Grandpa, wait. Don't be like this. I'm trying to help you, we all are." "Help me what?" "Help me sign away control of everything I've worked for. Help me become dependent on my family's good intentions." Tyler stood too, and I could see frustration flickering across his features. "You're being paranoid, it's just a power of attorney. You can revoke it any time. If I'm so paranoid and senile, why do you want me to make financial decisions like this?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since he'd arrived, he seemed at a loss for words. "I think," I continued, "that you should take these papers with you. If you and your father want to discuss my finances, maybe you should discuss it with me present." Tyler gathered the papers, his movements sharp with frustration. "You know what, Grandpa? Fine. But you can't stay independent forever. One day you're going to need help, and we won't always be available to give it." The threat was subtle but clear. I watched him leave, his expensive car backing out of the driveway I'd paid to have paved 15 years ago. As the sound of his engine faded, I sank back into my chair, feeling every one of my 78 years. The house felt impossibly quiet. It had been quiet since Martha died, but this was different. This was the silence that comes when you realize the people you love might not have your best interests at heart. I thought about calling David, but what would I say? Your son just tried to manipulate me into signing over my financial independence? Your son knows details about my accounts that he shouldn't know? It would sound like an old man being suspicious and paranoid, exactly what they apparently already thought. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat in Martha's old chair by the window. She'd always been the smart one about people, the one who could see through pretenses and false intentions. "What would you do, honey?" I whispered to the empty room. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. This house held 43 years of memories. Tyler's first steps taken right here in this living room, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper scattered everywhere, family dinners where everyone actually wanted to be here. When had it all changed? When had I become someone whose own family saw as an obstacle to be managed, rather than a person to be respected? My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. David's name flashed on the screen. "Hello, son." "Dad, Tyler just called me. He said you were upset about the power of attorney discussion." Upset is one way to put it. "Dad, we're just trying to help. You're getting older, and managing finances can be complicated. Tyler's got a business degree, he understands investments and—" "David," I interrupted, "do you think I'm incompetent?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, of course not. But you have to admit, you're not as sharp as you used to be. The electric bill thing, and last week you called me asking about that prescription when you'd already picked it up. Had I? I honestly couldn't remember, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Even if that's true," I said carefully, "don't you think any major decisions about my life should involve me?" "Of course. That's why we sent Tyler to talk to you first, instead of just handling things ourselves." The casual way he said it, handling things ourselves, sent a chill through me. They'd already discussed handling my affairs without me. This visit from Tyler hadn't been a family consultation. It had been an attempt to get my cooperation for something they'd already decided. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being the family patriarch and become the family problem. The man who'd worked double shifts to pay for David's college, who'd given him the down payment for his first house, who'd always been there when anyone needed help. I'd become someone whose own judgment couldn't be trusted. But here's what Tyler and David didn't understand. I hadn't survived the Great Recession, raised a family on a factory worker's salary, and built a life from nothing by being naive about people's motivations. I knew desperation when I saw it, and I was beginning to suspect there was more to Tyler's sudden interest in my finances than simple family concern. As I finally turned on the living room lamp, I made a decision. If my family wanted to treat me like I was losing my mental faculties, maybe it was time to show them just how sharp this old man still was. The next morning would bring phone calls to my lawyer, my bank, and a few people I trusted. If Tyler and David thought they could manipulate an old fool, they were about to learn they'd seriously underestimated Joseph Martinez. But tonight, I just sat with the weight of knowing that the people I loved most in the world saw me as nothing more than an obstacle standing between them and my money. The loneliness that settled over me was deeper than any I'd felt since Martha's funeral. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing Tyler's voice. "You're not using that money anyway." The casual dismissal of 43 years of labor, of every sacrifice Martha and I had made, of every dollar we'd carefully saved. By 5:30 in the morning, I was up, making coffee and planning my day. The first call went to Margaret Chen, my lawyer for the past 15 years. Margaret had handled Martha's will, helped me with some property issues, and had always been straight with me about everything. "Joe, good morning." Margaret's voice was warm but professional. "What can I do for you?" "Margaret, I need to ask you something confidential. If someone has power of attorney over my finances, what exactly can they do?" There was a pause. "Joe, is everything all right? Are you considering giving someone power of attorney? My grandson wants me to sign papers, says it would make things easier for everyone." "Joe, listen to me carefully. Financial power of attorney gives someone the legal right to access your bank accounts, make investments, sell your property, even change your will in some cases. They could theoretically drain your accounts, and there would be very little you could do to stop them quickly." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Even if the papers say it's revocable, revoking power of attorney can be complicated, especially if the person with power claims you're mentally incompetent. "Joe, please tell me you haven't signed anything yet." "No, Mom. Something didn't feel right about it." "Good. Joe, I hate to ask this, but do you have any reason to suspect your grandson might have financial problems?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. After I hung up with Margaret, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, writing down everything I could remember about Tyler's recent behavior. The expensive clothes, the new car I'd seen in my driveway, the way he'd checked his phone constantly like he was expecting important calls. When was the last time Tyler had visited just to spend time with me, without wanting something? I couldn't remember. My second call was to First National Bank, where I'd done business for 37 years. Janet Morrison had been my account manager for the last 10 years, and she knew me well enough to recognize my voice. "Mr. Martinez, how are you doing today?" "Janet, I need to ask you something. Has anyone been inquiring about my accounts, making any requests for information?" Another pause. In my experience, when bank employees pause, it's never good news. "Mr. Martinez, I need to check our records. Can you hold for just a moment?" The hold music seemed to go on forever. When Janet came back on the line, her tone had changed. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to come in today if possible. There are some things we should discuss in person." "Janet, just tell me, has someone been asking about my money?" "Sir, about 6 weeks ago, a man came in claiming to be your son. He said he was concerned about your mental state and wanted to know if there had been any unusual activity on your accounts. We told him we couldn't discuss your accounts without your written permission, but what? But he seemed to know details about your account balances that he shouldn't have known. We thought perhaps you'd shared that information with him." My hands started shaking. 6 weeks ago, right around the time David had started visiting more frequently, right around the time those conversations about my getting older had started. "Janet, I'll be there within the hour." The drive to the bank felt longer than usual. Every red light gave me more time to think, more time for the pieces to fall into place. David had been the one pushing for Tyler to handle my finances. David had somehow known my account balances. David had been setting this up for weeks, maybe months. At the bank, Janet led me to her office and closed the door. She was a woman in her 50s, always professional, always kind. Today she looked worried. "Mr. Martinez, I need to show you something." She turned her computer screen toward me. "This is a record of who has accessed information about your accounts. Now this should only show your visits and any legitimate inquiries with your written permission." She pointed to several entries over the past 2 months. "These visits were made by someone claiming to be your son, David Martinez. Each time he said he had concerns about your mental capacity and wanted to monitor your accounts for unusual activity." I felt sick. "Did you give him information?" "No, sir. We followed protocol." "But Mr. Martinez, he knew your mother's maiden name, your first pet's name, your childhood address. He knew the security questions on your account." The room felt like it was spinning. Those were details I'd shared with David over the years, family stories, childhood memories. He'd used my own memories against me. "Janet, I want to change all my security questions today. And I want to add a special note to my account that no information should be given to anyone, even family members, without my written permission." "Of course, sir. But Mr. Martinez, there's something else." She hesitated. "The man who came in, he wasn't alone the last time. He brought a younger man with him, said it was your grandson. They seemed very interested in your investment account specifically. Tyler had been there. They'd been planning this together." After leaving the bank, I drove to Rosie's Diner on 5th Street. It wasn't much to look at. Cracked vinyl booths, coffee that was always a little too strong, waitresses who'd been working there since the Carter administration. But it was where I'd been meeting my friend Frank Kowalski every Tuesday for the past 12 years, ever since we'd both retired from the mill. Frank was already there, sitting in our usual booth, reading the sports section and complaining about the Pirates pitching. At 76, Frank was 2 years younger than me but looked older, his face weathered from years of working outdoors after he left the mill. "You look like hell, Joe," he said, as I slid into the booth across from him. "What's eating you?" I told him everything. About Tyler's visit, about David's involvement, about what I'd learned at the bank. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or muttering something under his breath in Polish. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Frank said when I finished. "Your own kid? Your own grandson?" "I don't want to believe it, Frank, but the evidence is pretty clear." "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Tyler. "Grandpa talked to Dad. We think you might have misunderstood yesterday. Can I come over tonight to explain better?" I showed Frank the message. He snorted. "Kid's got brass, I'll give him that. Coming back for another try. Maybe I should hear what he has to say." "Joe, you're a good man, but sometimes you're too good for your own good. These vultures smell blood in the water. They think you're an easy mark because you're old and alone." Frank was right, but it still hurt to accept it. "What would you do?" "Me? I'd set a trap. Let the little weasel come over, let him think he's got you convinced, and then spring it on him that you know what he's been up to. The idea had merit, but it also scared me. What if I was wrong? What if there was some innocent explanation for everything? But deep down I knew I wasn't wrong. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. I texted Tyler back, "Come by around 7, we'll talk." The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I tried to keep busy, straightened up the house, made a grocery list, watched some television, but my mind kept wandering to the conversation ahead. How do you confront someone you love about betraying your trust? How do you look your grandson in the eye and tell him you know he's trying to steal from you? By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, I'd made my decision. Frank was right. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. Tyler arrived right on time, and this time he wasn't alone. David was with him. "Hi, Dad," David said, giving me a hug that felt forced. "Tyler told me about the misunderstanding yesterday. We thought it might be better if I explained things myself." "There wasn't any misunderstanding," I said, leading them into the living room. "But I'm willing to listen." We sat down, and David launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about family responsibility, about how they wanted to help me, about how the power of attorney was just a precaution. "Dad, you've always been independent, and we respect that. But you have to admit you're getting older. Yesterday you seemed confused about Tyler's visit, almost paranoid. We're worried about you." There it was, the setup. They were already laying the groundwork to claim I was mentally incompetent. "I wasn't confused at all," I said calmly. "In fact, I've never been more clear about anything in my life." I looked directly at Tyler. "Tell me, grandson, how exactly did you know I had over 400,000 in savings accounts?" Tyler glanced at his father, and in that moment I saw the truth written all over both their faces. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, tell me where in the world you're watching this from. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people we trust most. "Dad," David started, but I held up my hand. "No, son, I want Tyler to answer. How did you know those numbers?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of Martha's old mantel clock. In that silence I could feel 43 years of trust, crumbling like old concrete. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Tyler's face had gone pale, and David was staring at his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Finally, Tyler cleared his throat. "Grandpa, Dad mentioned that you had been saving money for years. I just estimated—" "Stop." The word came out harder than I intended, but I was tired of the lies. "Tyler, you didn't estimate anything. You knew the exact amount down to the nearest thousand. You want to know how I know that?" I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the notes I'd taken during my conversation with Janet at the bank. Both David and Tyler's eyes fixed on the paper like it was a loaded gun. "I spent the morning at First National Bank," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Turns out, someone's been impersonating me there. Someone who knew my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name, my childhood address. Someone who brought along a younger man he claimed was my grandson." David's face went ashen. "Dad, I can't explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been telling the bank employees that you're concerned about my mental state? Can you explain why you've been trying to access my account information for the past 2 months?" I stood up from my chair, and for the first time in years, I felt every inch of the height I'd inherited from my father. At 6'2", I still had a presence when I needed it. "Can you explain why my own son has been discussing my private finances with my grandson behind my back, making plans for my money like I'm already dead?" "It's not like that," David said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad, we're worried about you. You're almost 80 years old, living alone in this big house. What if something happens? What if you have a stroke or fall, or what if I die and leave you with the inconvenience of having to wait for probate?" I shot back. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Tyler fidgeted in his seat, still not meeting my eyes. David looked like he'd been slapped. "Dad, that's not fair. We love you. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me from what exactly? From making my own decisions? From living independently in the house I bought and paid for? Or protect me from keeping control of the money I earned?" I walked to the window, looking out at the street I'd called home for over 4 decades. The Hendersons across the street were out walking their dog, the same evening ritual they'd maintained for 15 years. Mrs. Chen from next door was watering her garden, just like Martha used to do. Normal people living normal lives, probably not worried about their own children plotting against them. "Tyler," I said without turning around, "why don't you tell me about your financial situation? How's that business degree working out for you?" When I turned back, Tyler was looking at his father with panic in his eyes. David gave him an almost imperceptible shake of the head. I'm doing fine, Grandpa. I just thought... You just thought what? That your old grandfather was too stupid to notice you've been driving a brand new BMW? That I wouldn't see that $1,000 suit you're wearing? That I wouldn't wonder where a recent college graduate working at a marketing firm gets that kind of money? Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I'd hit the mark. Or maybe, I continued, you thought I wouldn't find out that you've been gambling. Online poker, sports betting, whatever the hell else you kids do with your phones these days. The look on Tyler's face told me everything I needed to know. I'd been guessing about the gambling, but his expression confirmed it. How did you... Tyler started, then caught himself. How did I find out? Because I'm not the senile old fool you think I am. Because when someone tries to con me, I do my homework. That was partially true. After leaving the bank, I'd stopped by the library and asked Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, to help me look up Tyler on social media. I'd never used Facebook or Instagram, but Mrs. Patterson was patient with old-timers like me. Tyler's post told a story of someone living well beyond his means. Expensive restaurants, casino trips, pictures with friends at high-end bars. The kind of lifestyle that required either a very good job or a very bad habit. Dad, even if Tyler's made some mistakes with money, that doesn't change the fact that you need help managing your affairs, David said, trying to regain control of the conversation. You're right, I said, sitting back down. I do need help. I need help understanding how my son could look me in the eye and lie to me for months. I need help understanding how my grandson could sit at this table yesterday and try to manipulate me into signing away my independence. David's face flushed red. We weren't trying to manipulate anyone. We were trying to help. Help yourselves, you mean? That's not true, isn't it? I leaned forward in my chair. David, when was the last time you visited me just to spend time together? When was the last time Tyler called me just to chat? Not because he needed something. Neither of them answered because they couldn't. The truth was written all over their faces. You want to know what's really sad about this? I continued. If Tyler had come to me and said, Grandpa, I'm in trouble, I've made some bad decisions with money and I need help, I would have helped him. I would have done whatever I could because that's what family does. Tyler's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't finished. Instead, you two cooked up this scheme to trick me into signing over control of my finances. You made me feel like I was losing my mind, like I was becoming a burden. You made me doubt myself, doubt my own judgment. Grandpa, I'm sorry. No, Tyler. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. I stood up again, walked to the front door and opened it. I think it's time for both of you to leave. Dad, please, let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? I turned back to face them. You want to talk rationally? Here's rational. I've changed all my bank security information. I've put special instructions on my accounts. I've spoken with my lawyer. If either of you tries to access my financial information again, I'll press charges. David's face went white. Dad, you can't be serious. I'm deadly serious. And here's something else that's rational. I'm changing my will. The room went dead silent. Even the sound of Mrs. Chen's sprinkler system seemed to fade away. The will Martha and I made left everything to you, David, with instructions that it would go to Tyler and his children someday. That will was written by parents who believed their son would always act in their best interests. I walked back to where they were sitting, looking down at both of them. But I'm not leaving my life's work to people who see me as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome, people who would rather steal from me than earn their own way in the world. Tyler was openly crying now, and David looked like he might be sick. Dad, please don't do this. We can work this out. Tyler will get help. We'll make this right. Will you? Will Tyler pay back whatever gambling debts he owes? Will you stop treating me like I'm already dead? Will you start visiting because you want to see me, not because you want something from me? Neither of them answered. That's what I thought. I walked back to the front door and held it open wider. I want both of you to leave now. David stood up slowly, like an old man despite being only 53. Tyler wiped his eyes and followed his father toward the door. Dad, David said quietly as he passed me, I hope you'll reconsider. I hope you'll forgive us. David, I said, I've forgiven you for a lot of things over the years. I forgave you when you wrecked my car at 17. I forgave you when you dropped out of college the first time. I forgave you when you couldn't pay your mortgage, and I gave you $15,000 to save your house. I paused, looking directly into his eyes. But I can't forgive you for making me feel like a fool in my own home. I can't forgive you for teaching your son that his grandfather is just a bank account to be raided. They left without another word. I watched through the window as they got into David's car, saw them sitting there talking for several minutes before driving away. probably planning their next move, figuring out how to fix this mess they'd created. But as I closed the door and turned back to my empty house, I realized something. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The confusion, the self-doubt, the feeling that maybe I really was losing my mental sharpness, all of that had been manufactured by people who wanted me to doubt my own judgment. I wasn't losing my mind. I was just surrounded by people who wanted me to think I was. If you've ever had to make the hard choice between family loyalty and self-respect, let me know what country you're watching from. Sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones we need protection from. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Martha's chair, feeling more alone than I had since she died, but also more clear-headed than I'd felt in months. Tomorrow, I would call Margaret and start the process of changing my will. Tonight, I would grieve for the family I thought I had. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. For the first time since Tyler's initial visit, I wasn't second-guessing myself or wondering if I was overreacting. The house felt different too, like a weight had been lifted from the rooms themselves. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my morning coffee when the phone started ringing. It was barely 7:30 in the morning, but I had a feeling I knew who it would be. David's name flashed on the caller ID. I let it ring. It rang again 20 minutes later, then again an hour after that. By noon, I'd received 12 calls from David and 6 from Tyler. I didn't answer any of them. What I did do was drive to Margaret Chen's law office. Margaret had been expecting my call after our conversation yesterday, and she'd cleared her afternoon schedule for me. "Joe," she said, as I settled into the chair across from her desk, "you sounded upset yesterday. Are you sure you want to make changes to your will right now? Sometimes it's better to let emotions settle before making major decisions." "Margaret, I appreciate the advice, but this isn't an emotional decision. This is the most rational decision I've made in years." I told her everything that had happened: the attempted manipulation, David's impersonation at the bank, Tyler's gambling problems, the months of being made to feel like I was losing my mental capacity. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on her legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and shook her head. "Joe, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Unfortunately, what you're describing is more common than people realize. Elder financial abuse often comes from family members who feel entitled to inheritance money while their relatives are still alive." "Is that what this was, elder abuse? What David did at the bank, impersonating you to access account information, that's identity theft. Tyler's attempt to pressure you into signing a power of attorney under false pretenses could be considered fraud. Yes, Joe, this was absolutely elder abuse." The words hit me harder than I expected. Elder abuse. At 78, I'd become a victim of my own family. "Now," Margaret continued, "let's talk about your options. You mentioned wanting to change your will. I want them completely removed. David, Tyler, all of them." "Joe, that's certainly you're right, but let me ask you something. Do you have any other family? Any charities you care about? Anyone else you'd want to benefit from your estate?" I thought about it. Martha and I had never had other children. David was our only child, Tyler our only grandchild. My brother had died 10 years ago, and his kids lived in California and rarely kept in touch. "There's St. Mary's Food Pantry," I said finally. "Martha and I volunteered there for 15 years after we retired, and maybe something for the library. They've always been good to me." Margaret nodded, making notes. "We can certainly set that up. But Joe, I want you to consider something else. What if we created a will that protects you, but also gives your family a chance to earn back your trust?" "What do you mean?" "Well, we could set up the bulk of your estate to go to charities, but include a provision that if David and Tyler complete certain conditions, therapy for Tyler's gambling maybe, or a period of time where they don't contact you unless you initiate it, they could receive a smaller inheritance." I considered this. Part of me wanted to cut them off completely, but another part, the part that remembered teaching Tyler to ride a bike, that remembered David as a little boy helping me work in the garden, wasn't ready to give up entirely. "Let me think about it," I said. After leaving Margaret's office, I drove to Frank's house. I needed to talk to someone who understood what I was going through, someone who wouldn't judge me for feeling torn between anger and love. Frank lived in a small ranch house about 10 minutes from mine, in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but was still respectable. He was working in his garage when I pulled up, tinkering with an old lawnmower that probably should have been replaced years ago. "Joe," he called out when he saw me, "how'd it go last night? Did you give those vultures what for?" I told him about the confrontation. about the lawyer's visit, about the constant phone calls I'd been ignoring all day. Frank wiped his hands on an old rag and shook his head. Son of a bitch. Your own kid, Joe. I still can't believe it. The lawyer says it's called elder abuse. Elder abuse, my ass. It's called being a greedy bastard who forgot where he came from. We sat on Frank's front steps, drinking beer despite it being barely 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes you need a beer to process betrayal regardless of the time. You know what the worst part is? I said after a while. Part of me still wants to fix this. Part of me wants to believe they can change. That's because you're a good man, Joe. But being good doesn't mean being stupid. Margaret suggested I could set up conditions in my will. Ways for them to earn back some inheritance if they prove they've changed. Frank snorted. Like what? Tyler promises to stop gambling? David promises to stop being a lying sack of shit? Something like that. Joe, let me tell you something. I've been married 4 times, and 3 of those times I kept thinking the woman would change if I just loved her enough, if I just gave her enough chances. You know what I learned? I shook my head. People don't change unless they want to change. And people who are willing to steal from their own family, they don't usually want to change. They just want to not get caught. As we sat there, my phone buzzed with another call from David. Frank saw the name on the screen. You gonna answer that? Not today. Good. Let him sweat. Let him wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning. Might teach him something about respect. That evening, I was watching the news when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Tyler getting out of his BMW, walking slowly toward my front door like a man approaching his own execution. The doorbell rang. I muted the television, but didn't get up. It rang again. Then I heard Tyler's voice through the door. Grandpa, please, I know you're in there. I just want to talk. I stayed in my chair. Grandpa, I'm not leaving until you talk to me. I'll sit on this porch all night if I have to. Something in his voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded like genuine desperation. Against my better judgment, I walked to the door and opened it. Tyler looked terrible. His eyes were red and puffy, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank you for opening the door. You've got 5 minutes, I said, not inviting him in. Grandpa, I came to confess. I came to tell you the truth about everything. I crossed my arms and waited. I owe money to some very bad people, Tyler began, his voice shaking. I got into online gambling about 2 years ago, started small, but it got out of control fast. I owe $87,000 to a bookie in Pittsburgh, and if I don't pay it back by the end of this month, they're going to hurt me, maybe kill me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this. Dad doesn't know how bad it is, Tyler continued. He thinks I just have some credit card debt. But these people, Grandpa, they're not credit card companies. They've already broken my friend Marco's legs. They told me I'm next. I stared at my grandson, this young man I'd watched grow up, who'd sat on my lap as a child, who'd called me his hero, and saw a stranger. A desperate, frightened stranger who'd been willing to steal from me to save his own skin. So you decided to steal from your grandfather, I said flatly. I didn't think of it as stealing. I convinced myself that you'd want to help if you knew, but I was too ashamed to tell you the truth, so I thought if I could just get control of the accounts, I could borrow what I needed and pay it back before you even knew it was gone. Borrow without permission. That's called stealing, Tyler. He started crying again, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. I know what I am, I know what I tried to do to you, but Grandpa, I'm scared. I'm so fucking scared, and I don't know what to do. I'd never heard Tyler swear in front of me before. The desperation in his voice was real, raw, and it cut through my anger like a knife through butter. What about your father? What's his excuse for lying to me, for impersonating me at the bank? Tyler wiped his nose with his sleeve. I told him I had some gambling debts. I didn't tell him how much or who I owed money to. I just said I needed help, and that maybe you could co-sign a loan or something. He said the only way to get you to help would be to show you that you needed help managing your money. So he came up with the power of attorney scheme. Yeah, he said if we could prove you weren't handling your finances well, you'd be grateful for our help. He said it would be better for everyone. I stared at Tyler for a long moment, seeing not the manipulative young man who'd sat at my kitchen table 3 days ago, but the terrified kid he really was underneath all the lies. Tyler, I said finally, if you had come to me 2 months ago and told me the truth, all of it, what do you think I would have done? He looked up at me with those red, swollen eyes. I thought you'd be disappointed in me. I thought you'd lecture me about responsibility and making smart choices. I would have, I said, and then I would have helped you. The words hung between us like a bridge he was afraid to cross. Even now, he whispered, Even after everything I've done to you? I looked at this broken young man standing on my porch, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there. The hurt was still real, but underneath it all was something stronger, love. Complicated, painful, inconvenient love. "Tyler," I said, "come inside. We need to have a real conversation. Where are you watching this from? If you've ever had to choose between protecting yourself and helping someone who betrayed you, I'd love to know what part of the world you're tuning in from tonight." As Tyler stepped into my house, I realized that the hardest part of this whole ordeal wasn't dealing with the betrayal. It was figuring out how to love someone who'd hurt me while still protecting myself from being hurt again. Tyler sat across from me at the same kitchen table where this whole nightmare had started 3 days ago. But everything was different now. The arrogance was gone, the expensive suit was rumpled, and in place of the confident young man who'd tried to manipulate me was a scared kid who looked like he hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. "Tell me everything," I said, setting a cup of coffee in front of him. "And Tyler, I mean everything. No more lies, no more half-truths. If you want my help, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Tyler wrapped his hands around the coffee cup like it was an anchor. "It started about 2 years ago. I was working late at the marketing firm, bored out of my mind, and some of the guys were talking about this online poker site. They said it was easy money, that you could make a few $100 a night if you knew what you were doing." He took a shaky sip of coffee. "At first, it was just $20 or $30 here and there. I'd win some, lose some, but it was exciting. Made my job feel less meaningless, you know?" I nodded, remembering my own father's struggles with alcohol. Addiction always started as something that made life feel better. Then I started winning bigger. Made $800 one night, $1,200 another night. I thought I was good at it, thought I had some kind of system figured out. But you didn't. No, God, no. I was just lucky for a while, and I was too stupid to quit while I was ahead. When I started losing, I told myself it was just a bad streak. I'd double my bets to win back what I'd lost, but that just made the losses bigger. Tyler's voice cracked. Within 6 months, I'd lost everything in my savings account, but by then I couldn't stop. It was like I needed to gamble just to feel normal. The rush when I won was the only time I felt alive. I'd seen this before. Not gambling specifically, but addiction. The way it changed people, made them into strangers wearing familiar faces. "So you borrowed money?" "Credit cards first. Maxed out 3 of them. Then I took a loan against my car. Then I started borrowing from friends, telling them I had some temporary cash flow problems. And when that wasn't enough," Tyler's face went pale. "That's when I met Vince Torino." The name sent a chill down my spine. I'd lived in Pittsburgh long enough to know the Torino family wasn't in any legitimate business. "Jesus Christ, Tyler. The mob? You borrowed money from the mob?" I didn't think of it that way. I found this guy online who said he could loan money to people with bad credit. No questions asked. I met him at a coffee shop downtown, and he seemed normal enough, professional even. "How much did you borrow?" $20,000 initially, at 15% interest per month. I did the math in my head. 15% per month. "Tyler, that's 180% annually. That's not a loan, that's extortion." "I know that now, but I was desperate, and I was sure I could win enough to pay it back quickly. Instead, I lost it all in 2 weeks. "So you borrowed more?" Tyler nodded miserably. "Another 20,000, then 30, then 40. Every time I lost, Vince would offer to loan me more money to get back on my feet. He was always so understanding, so patient, until you couldn't pay. The interest alone was killing me. I was supposed to pay $3,000 a month just in interest, and my salary was only $4,500 a month after taxes. I fell behind, and that's when Vince stopped being understanding." Tyler pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. The language was crude and threatening, promising broken bones and worse if payment wasn't received soon. He gave me until the end of this month, that's 8 days from now, to pay the full balance, $87,000. I sat back in my chair trying to process the magnitude of what Tyler had gotten himself into. $87,000 to dangerous people who'd already demonstrated they were willing to use violence. "What about your father? Does he know about Vince?" "God, no. Dad thinks I just have some credit card debt and maybe owe money to friends. If he knew I was involved with people like this," Tyler shuddered, "he'd probably have a heart attack." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Chen's dog barking at something in her backyard. Normal sounds from a normal world that suddenly felt very far away. "Tyler," I said finally, "why should I help you? You tried to steal from me. You made me doubt my own mental capacity. You manipulated me, lied to me, and used my own son against me. Give me one good reason why I should risk my money to save you from consequences of your own making." Tyler looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't give you a good reason. What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that." His honesty surprised me. I'd expected him to make excuses, to try to justify his actions or appeal to family loyalty. "But Grandpa," he continued, "I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm asking you to do it because you're the kind of man who wouldn't let anyone get hurt if he could prevent it, even someone who doesn't deserve help." That hit me harder than any manipulation attempt could have. He was right. I couldn't live with myself knowing Tyler might be seriously hurt or killed when I had the power to prevent it. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Lend me the money. I'll pay back every penny, I swear. I'll get a second job. I'll sell everything I own. I'll do whatever it takes." "Tyler, at your current salary, even if you gave me every penny you earned, it would take you 4 years to pay back $87,000. That's assuming you don't need money for food, rent, gas, or anything else. Then I'll figure something else out. I'll find a way." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd lived for so many years. This house, this life I'd built with Martha, it was supposed to be simple. Work hard, save money, take care of family. When had it all become so complicated? "Tyler, if I help you, and I'm not saying I will, there would have to be conditions." He sat up straighter. "Anything, I'll agree to anything. First, you get help for the gambling addiction. Real help. Professional counseling, support groups, whatever it takes." "Yes, absolutely." "Second, you give me complete access to your finances, bank accounts, credit cards, everything. I want to see every dollar you spend until this debt is paid off." Tyler hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." "Third, you move out of that expensive apartment and find something you can actually afford. You sell the BMW and buy a used car. You stop living beyond your means immediately." "I can do that." "And fourth," I said, turning back to face him, "you tell your father the truth, all of it, about the gambling, about Vince, about everything." Tyler's face went white. "Grandpa, please, that will destroy him. He's so proud of me, thinks I'm doing so well. He thinks you're doing well because you've been lying to him, just like you lied to me. But if he knows I borrowed money from people like Vince, then maybe he'll understand the seriousness of what you've done. Maybe he'll be able to help you stay accountable." Tyler put his head in his hands. "He'll never forgive me. Tyler, your father participated in a scheme to manipulate me into signing over control of my finances. He impersonated me at the bank. He's not exactly in a position to judge anyone right now." We were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. Through the window, I saw David getting out of his sedan, his face grim with determination. "Did you tell him you were coming here?" I asked Tyler. "No, I told him I was going to try to talk to you, but I didn't say when." David knocked on the front door, then tried the doorbell when I didn't answer immediately. "Dad, I know Tyler's here. I saw his car. Please, we need to talk." I looked at Tyler. "This is your chance to tell him the truth, all of it." Tyler's hands were shaking as he stood up. "I don't know if I can. Then you'll face Vince Torino alone, because I won't help someone who's still lying to his family." The knocking continued, more insistent now. "Dad, please, whatever Tyler's told you, whatever he's asked you for, you need to know the whole story before you make any decisions." I looked at Tyler sharply. "What does he mean, the whole story?" Tyler's face had gone ashen. There's something else I haven't told you." My blood ran cold. "What else?" "Vince doesn't just want money, he wants me to do something for him. A job." "What kind of job?" Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. "He wants me to rob someone, an old man who lives alone and keeps cash in his house." The room started spinning. "Tyler, tell me you didn't—" "I haven't done it yet. But if I can't pay him, he says it's the only way to work off the debt." David's voice came through the door again. "Dad, Tyler's planning to rob someone. You have to let me in." I stared at my grandson, this young man I'd loved since the day he was born, and realized that everything I thought I knew about this situation had just changed again. If you've ever discovered that someone you love is in deeper trouble than you could have imagined, tell me what country you're watching from. Sometimes the people we're trying to save are drowning in waters much deeper than we realized. The knocking on my door continued, but all I could think about was what Tyler had just confessed. Not only was he in debt to dangerous people, but they were trying to turn him into a criminal. And somehow David knew about it. How long had my family been lying to me? And how deep did this betrayal really go? I walked to the front door with Tyler trailing behind me, his face pale as death. When I opened it, David practically fell into the house, his eyes wild with panic. "Dad, thank God." We need to talk, all of us. About Tyler planning to rob someone, I said, my voice ice cold. David's face crumpled. He told you. He told me part of it. You seem to know the rest. I led them both back to the living room, where we sat in the same configuration as 3 days ago, but everything had changed. The power dynamic, the secrets, the very nature of our relationship, all of it was different now. David, I said, start talking. How long have you known about this robbery plan? David ran his hands through his hair, making it stick up at odd angles. Tyler called me yesterday, crying, saying these people were going to kill him if he didn't pay. That's when he told me about owing money to the Torino family. And the robbery? That's when I knew we were in real trouble. Dad, these aren't just loan sharks. The Torinos don't just break legs. They own half the illegal gambling in Pittsburgh. If they want Tyler to rob someone, it's not just about the money he owes, they're recruiting him. Tyler spoke up, his voice barely audible. Vince said if I do this job successfully, it wipes out my debt and I can work for them. He said I'd make more money in a month than I make in a year at my regular job. They're trying to turn you into a career criminal, I said. Yes, David said. And Dad, the worst part is I know who they want him to rob. My blood turned to ice. Who? David looked at Tyler, who was staring at his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Tell him, David said quietly. Tyler looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. You, Grandpa. They want me to rob you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, felt the room tilt on its axis. My own grandson had been recruited to rob me. They know about your money, Tyler continued through his sobs. Vince has been watching you, studying your routines. He knows you live alone, knows you're old enough that you might not be able to fight back effectively. How does he know about me? I told him. Tyler's voice broke completely. When I was trying to convince him to give me more time to pay, I mentioned that my grandfather had money but was too stubborn to help family. Vince got very interested in that. I stood up abruptly, walking to the window again, because I needed to move, needed to process what I was hearing. So your plan was what? Come here, gain my trust, get me to sign that power of attorney, and then what? Give my money to these criminals? No, Tyler said quickly. That was never the plan. The power of attorney thing was Dad's idea. He thought if we could access your accounts legally, I could borrow what I needed and pay it back before you noticed. But when that didn't work, David continued, and Tyler missed his payment deadline, Vince gave him an ultimatum. Either rob you directly or they'd kill him. I turned back to face them. And you've known about this since yesterday? Yes, David said. That's why I've been calling you all day. I was trying to figure out how to tell you, how to protect both you and Tyler. By letting me get robbed by my own grandson? No. David stood up, his own emotion finally breaking through. Dad, I would never let that happen. Never. I was trying to figure out how to get Tyler away from these people, how to pay off his debt without what? Without telling me the truth? Without letting me make my own decision about how to handle this? David deflated back into his chair. You're right, we should have told you everything from the beginning. I looked at these two men, my son and my grandson, and saw them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. David, 53 years old, still trying to solve problems without admitting he needed help. Tyler, 25 and drowning in consequences, he was too young and too foolish to navigate alone. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. Tyler, you're going to call this Vince person and tell him you can't do the job. Grandpa, I can't, he'll kill me. No, he won't, because you're going to tell him that you've found another way to pay your debt. Tyler looked confused. What other way? I walked to the old secretary desk in the corner of the room, the one Martha used to pay bills on every month. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a checkbook, not the one for my regular checking account, but the one for my money market account. I'm going to lend you the money, I said. The room went dead silent. Dad, David said finally, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious, but there are going to be conditions, non-negotiable conditions. I sat back down, looking directly at Tyler. First, you call Vince right now in front of me and tell him you have the money. You set up a meeting to pay him off completely. Principal, interest, everything. Tyler nodded, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. Second, the moment that debt is paid, you check yourself into gambling addiction treatment. I've already called a facility in Philadelphia. They have a bed available next week. Philadelphia? Tyler looked panicked. But your job will have to wait. Your life is more important than your career. Third, I continued, when you get out of treatment, you're going to pay me back every penny. Not with interest, I'm not a loan shark, but every penny of the principal. It might take you 10 years, but you'll pay it back. I will, Grandpa, I promise. And fourth, I said, turning to David, you're going to family counseling, both of you, because this whole situation happened because this family stopped communicating honestly with each other. David nodded, tears in his eyes. Dad, I'm so sorry for everything, for not trusting you with the truth, for going behind your back, for treating you like you couldn't handle your own life. I'm sorry too, Tyler said, for trying to manipulate you, for putting you in danger, for being such a disappointment. I looked at both of them, really looked at them, and saw not the manipulative schemers I'd been angry with, but my family. Flawed, scared, imperfect, but still my family. Tyler, you're not a disappointment. You're a young man who made some terrible choices and got in over his head, but you're also someone who was brave enough to tell me the truth when it mattered most. I turned to David. And you're not a bad son. You're a father who was trying to protect his child the only way he knew how. But David, you forgot that I'm still your father too, and I've been dealing with difficult situations a lot longer than you have. Tyler was openly crying now, but they seemed like tears of relief rather than despair. There's one more thing, I said. We're going to involve the police. Both of them looked alarmed. Not about you, I clarified to Tyler. But the Torinos need to know that this family is under police protection. After you pay Vince, we're going to file a report about the threats and extortion attempts. Make sure they understand that any retaliation will bring down serious law enforcement attention. Will that work? David asked. Criminals like the Torinos stay in business by avoiding attention from law enforcement. Once they know a situation could bring heat down on their operation, they usually cut their losses and move on. Tyler called Vince while we sat there. The conversation was brief and tense, but Vince agreed to meet the next day to settle the debt. I could hear his voice through the phone, cold, professional, dangerous, and I felt a chill knowing that my grandson had been dealing with people like this. After Tyler hung up, we sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, David spoke. Dad, why are you doing this? After everything we put you through, why are you helping us? I thought about Martha, about the conversations we used to have about family, about forgiveness, about the difference between enabling bad behavior and offering second chances. Because, I said finally, that's what family does. Not the family that lies to each other and tries to manipulate each other, but real family. The kind that tells hard truths and makes difficult sacrifices for each other. I looked at Tyler, and because everyone deserves a chance to make things right. But Tyler, this is your only chance. If you ever lie to me again, if you ever try to manipulate me or anyone else in this family, if you ever gamble so much as $1, you're on your own. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I understand. 3 months later, Tyler completed his inpatient treatment program and moved back to Pittsburgh. He found a job at a non-profit organization, making half what he'd made at the marketing firm, but it was honest work, and it was enough to live on modestly while he paid me back. David and Tyler went to family counseling together, and slowly, painfully, they learned how to communicate without lies and manipulation. As for me, I never did change my will back to its original form. Instead, I set up a trust that would provide for my family while also supporting the charities Martha and I had cared about. Margaret Chen helped me structure it so that if David or Tyler ever tried to contest it or manipulate the system again, their portions would go entirely to charity. But I don't think that will be necessary. Sometimes people really can change, given the right motivation and the right support. The house feels different now, not empty like it did after Martha died, but peaceful. David visits every Sunday for dinner, and Tyler calls me every Wednesday evening to check in and update me on his progress. We talk about real things now, their struggles, their victories, their fears for the future. It's not the family I thought I had, but it's the family we've become, and sometimes that's enough. If you've made it this far in my story, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from. Family is complicated everywhere, but love, real love, always finds a way to survive the worst storms. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our help the most. And sometimes the hardest thing we can do is choose love over safety, forgiveness over anger, hope over fear. It's been 6 months since this all started, and Tyler has paid back $12,000 of what he owes me. At this rate, it'll take him about 4 more years to pay it all back. But every month, when I deposit his payment, I don't see the money. I see a young man keeping his promise, rebuilding his life $1 at a time, and that's worth more than any amount of money I could have saved by turning my back on my family when they needed me most.